Hey everybody, welcome back to the collective. We have another fantastic day. We're going a little bit earlier today because Shaun has to
Sorry,
drive
boys.
somewhere. I mean, really. It's
Sorry.
always
It's
it's
always
always
me.
I
I'm
just
sorry. I'm
it,
sorry.
it's all good. We're happy to do it. Thank you, Corey and Matt, for making the adjustment and coming in a little bit earlier. Matt, I saw you running around the field of broken dreams this morning.
Yeah, that was yesterday. Yeah.
What were you doing up on base?
They got a nice driving range. It's cheap to go
Oh,
like lob balls. And just kind of like very meditative and very zenish. And like all I focus on is just cracking balls. And then I went for a little skate around the field of lost dreams.
I like it. I like it. So
Yeah,
this
yeah.
That's
is
cool.
this is the thing in Edmonton on the base. There is a a running path around a very large field, and so you have a highway on one side and you have a field on the other, and it never seems to end. So like we've rucked it many times, we've run it many times. The whole stretch, I think, is probably I don't know what like 3K, something like that. It's not too
Yeah,
long,
yeah.
but it just feels like it goes on forever and ever and ever. And you'll like look up and you're in the same spot, and you look over at somebody else and you look back and you're in the same spot. And you'll like, so it got the nickname the Field of Broken Dreams or the Field of Lost Dreams or a number of names for it. So just very hilarious. Um, Now, before we get into anything, while I'm trying to explain to everybody what the Field of Lost Dreams is, by all means, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that great stuff. If you do have any questions or comments, throw them up in the comment section here. We do read them all and we get them up here to discuss them. Also, none of us are doctors. So anything we do say is our own personal experience or anecdotes that we've been dealt with, and take it with a grain of salt. Do your own research and then hit us back. Let us know if there's something we need to adjust or change, because we're always open for anything, really. Now, today's topic. Actually, I was talking with a friend of mine last night. We had him over and we were hanging out, and I asked him, I was like, hey, man, is there anything you think we should talk about on the collective? And he's like, what about the depiction of military, um, firefighters, policemen, all these things that you see on TV? And how does that give a misconception of what the job is actually like? And I was like, that's a very good topic. I'm going to throw it to the boys and see what we come up with, because I know for me, the moment I learned about high explosives, it ruined explosives in movies for me, right? And I think that the depiction that we're seeing kind of goes into what we were talking about yesterday, Shaun, with the dark side, is the fact that what the media is driving, and I mean movies and TV and new like everything, what that is driving, I think creates a misconception of what the job actually is, what all of these types of jobs are, because at the basis of them, I think they're all about service at the lowest level. What do you guys think? Depiction, misconceptions. Anybody want to jump on it first?
Sure.
Yeah.
Now that I understand, I see where it came together, or why a depiction was chosen. Hollywood or the media depicting various service related roles, military or what have you, incorrectly or falsely. But you know what? It isn't Hollywood, man. We're allowing it to be depicted without us having these kind of conversations. Now, when someone starts explaining to me what JTF2 is all about, if they don't know that I was in JTF2, their idea of how it is all supposed to work and what we do is radically different than what we actually did or do. And then it's my responsibility to then help them clearly understand that they are way off base, or hey, stop watching Call of Duty or what have you. So it's not just their fault, it's our fault if we don't clear up these kind of things. So that's my first thought on depiction.
I like it. Corey, what are your thoughts?
Interestingly enough, it's something that I've run into more and more the longer that I've been in my career. You always start off with that idea of service. You always start off with that idea, especially in a first responder role of wanting to help people. The issue that comes in is the fact that you don't see all the behind the scenes, which is generally about 90% of it. And you don't realize the effort that is required to do what seems like very small things. So logically, you would think, whoa, if somebody on TV, somebody in a movie needs to do that, it looks like it takes about 5 minutes. That's about it. But actually, it's the sheer amount of grit and determination and loopholes and red tape that you have to get through in order to even action something that looks like forward advancement on anything. So I think there's what looks sexy on TV and sexy in movies and things that people want to see that are perpetuated because something is popular. A particular movie or a particular part of a movie was very popular. So movie makers, TV producers will catch on that and try to reproduce that. So it's almost like we're doing a disservice by continually perpetuating that simply for the entertainment. But to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't go in and watch an hour-and-a-half movie of me doing my job. That's just be boring, and nobody would want to see that.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's a tough one. Matt, what do you think?
I think it's the goal. I think it's all down to the goal of what the perception is designed for, right? Hollywood's to make money, right? News is to create, I'm going to say this, right? But it's to create drama and knowledge in a way. So why would they want to, show, like what Cory was saying, the 90% of the mundane when they can just show the 10% of the excitement and have like their story or their money or their point pushed, right? Yeah, like Cory said, part of my career was washing concrete outside while it was raining. I mean, it's not that exciting, right? But I mean, it's really the end goal. And like what Shaun and like JTF2, Special Forces, going dark, blackout, you don't want that perception. You don't want that. You don't want people to know that. That's from my assumption. I'm not putting words in your mouth, right? But it's what is the goal is basically what you have to look at first, I think, and then this figure it out from there.
Mm-hmm. I like it. Go ahead.
A scene came to mind as a good example of the misconception via depiction of a, we'll call them ninja assassins or whatever you want to call it, that Hollywood designed. And it's a scene from Mission Impossible 47 or whatever number it was. And it was some characters Aussie rappelling down the outside of an office tower, glass office tower. And as they get down, they do an explosive breach through their window. They kick in, they're doing the thing, all the usual stuff. And like, that's really complex stuff, man. It's really complicated. And I'm not going to say anyone can do it because very few can do it well. But for the few that can do it, it's like, holy moly, it's so many tens of thousands of hours to get to that point where you're comfortable going down the side of a building to do that thing. But the misconception out there, because it's depicted as sexy, it's depicted as easy, it's depicted as flawless, it's seamless, it was magical. The way it's depicted without any errors occurring creates a misconception out there that, hey, one day I want to do that. It looks fun. But it ain't fun. It's freaking heinous to get there. Mm-hmm. It is diabolically hard to spend all of the years to get to the point where eventually you're clicking into that beaner and about to go over the edge upside down to do that thing. So the misconception is, wow, I'd love to do that fun wizard stuff. No, you wouldn't, because you don't want to do the bajillion push-ups in your first several years to even be able to spell Aussie Rappel. And that's just the way of the West, man. That's the way of the world to some degree. But it's definitely the way of the West, where kids have been raised in a video game mentality of that's the sexy stuff, that's the fun stuff, that's the cool stuff. One day I'm going to go do that thing. The misconception of what they think they want to do by a depiction of sexy, fun stuff, I think that it creates an idealized future, certainly in young boys' minds or young men's minds, an idealized future of what they would like to be, but they don't understand what it takes to be that, and therefore they never, ever close the gap of trying to get to their what they want to be aspect. And I don't know how to bridge that gap for someone that I don't want to ruin their idealized dream of becoming something that maybe they're not trying to aspire to be, but would be nice maybe if they could be that. But they don't understand the body of work that it takes to get there. And so the misconception is putting the sexy thing out there as the idealized future, but no backstory to, bro, be prepared to bleed to get to that start line.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? I got a couple of comments here I wanted to hit, but any other thoughts?
No, Mission Impossible 47 was pretty good.
Is that the one where Tom Cruise runs?
Does he jump off of something too?
Yeah, he usually jumps and grabs something as well.
The ninja run.
Yeah, the ninja run. Yeah.
No, but my point was that, like, with that high speed, low drag, Aussie repelling, a high breach charge, entry, breaching things, how many cutscenes were there? I mean, that's the thing. They don't show that aspect of that, number 3 dude getting in the knot and then bashing his head into the window before he even gets down to the breach. Or, like, in that fancy breach, that was likely pre-done. Like, there's like 6 hours of prepping your data sheet and everything. You don't see that. And then that's where like 90% seems to come up a lot today, but I mean, that's where the lie is actually there, is that you only see the cutscenes, and life is not a cutscene. Life is a constant reel, right? So, yeah.
I was actually, sorry, go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say, if I can even just piggyback on that, I think the other part that we have too is the depiction tends to become the reality for most people who have never done it. Very, very similar to what everybody's been saying. But then you get the idea of somebody watching something that they've never done before, but they've seen on TV, they've seen on a movie several times. It's been repeated, so it must be fact. And they look at it and see somebody doing it, and maybe it's not perfect, maybe they don't like it, and they say, I would have done something different. And it's like, no, you wouldn't have. If you'd been in that exact same situation 99% of the time, with the training that you would have received, the experience you would have had, you would have done the exact same thing. No, it wasn't perfect. Often it's ugly, but that doesn't mean that you would have done something different just because you've seen it on TV, you've seen it in a movie, Tom Cruise ran, and you would have done exactly the same. No, you wouldn't have.
I got a great point on that. And I'm not pushing back on you at all, Corey, but you would have done something different. You would have done worse.
Well,
you know what I mean? Like, most people they see the depiction of what's happening, and then they have this misconception, like, oh, well, that person is me. I can do that, no problem. I just watched how to do it. Sure, I can pick it up, no problem, and be good to go. One of the big ones that really, I had somebody say this to me at one point, riding and shooting was like being on a horse and shooting at the same time. They're like, oh yeah, it's simple. You just, you point and shoot. Same thing as shooting. And I'm like, not even close, because there are all the number of factors. To your point about rappelling down the thing, nobody talks about the hours of sitting there, coiling your ropes and tying off and make sure your knots are good, doing all that stuff, right? You don't see that in the movies, but it's kind of hilarious.
Well, you did say something that brought a conversation to mind, Chance, and about riding and shooting. So I hadn't known my wife too long, and we were driving along, and I was busy at the time. We weren't married, and I was still in international security and consultant. I was driving along. I think now listen, maybe this did happen or maybe this didn't happen. I was driving along, and I was driving with my knees as I was responding to a thing, and blah, 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 whatever. And we were at high speed, and she looked at me and she said, you can't do that. And I just looked at her, and I didn't give it any thought, which was a mistake, of course. I said, what? I used to drive, talk on a radio, and shoot out the window. I can do a few things, dear. And she just looked at me, and she just shook her head, and I realized, that wasn't the right answer. But I know it wasn't the right answer. But the answer was correct. I mean, I was trained to do that. Mm-hmm. I've done it. I know how to do it. But that is a skill set that takes a long time to do. Now, if you watch it on TV and you think, oh, Hollywood did it, that means I can do it. If you're going to try to do that, be prepared to crash, or prepare to shoot yourself in your own foot as you're pulling out your weapon, or blah, blah, blah. The reality is that you've got to sweat, you've got to bleed, and you got to cry to get to a level where you can replicate even closely the misconception that Hollywood pushes out as reality. The depiction of reality is so off base that, man, there's some things that they do that I don't think any human can do, but is portrayed as doable as a human. So the idea being that if there is if you're seeing a scene where someone is riding a horse and shooting, well, I've ridden a horse and shot, but you've got to do a lot of things before you even approach the horse to be able to start combining skill stacks to be able to be all large and in charge like you're a lightweight Tom Cruise.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, is there's all the training to the horse as well. That's got to be able to ride and be able to handle shooting on someone on its back. The best description I ever had of this was kind of hilarious. A buddy of mine was like, when training horses, especially brand new horses who have never been ridden before and all that stuff, is you're a predator trying to get a prey animal to take another dead animal on its back to the most not the most pleasant place to put a dead animal onto another animal, and then you as a predator climb onto its back and have that horse trust you in all of that. And I was like, it takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort to get to that level, and that's just to ride the horse, let alone all the other stuff on top of it. So Salty Jinx kicks this in. He says, it's easy for the mind to catch on the shiny stuff, whether it's real or not. And when you tell them the truth, it shatters the image of the world one piece at a time. Most people don't understand that the military in general is 99.9% training and cleaning in preparation for deployment. That may never come. 99.9%. Yeah, I'd say 90% of that's cleaning. Definitely. I know I've done a lot of that. I'm sure Shaun and Cory and everybody. And then Tanya's got a really great question here. So maybe a false dichotomy, but how does one find the balance of being able to make split-second decisions, whole in the moment, but also keep the long game in mind in every choice we make? What do you think? Shaun, I'm going to put you on this one because...
Sure. If I hear someone saying whole, it's just another micro moment in the long game of life. So a long time ago, I stopped thinking of the balance of things that are occurring in the now or about to occur in the very near future of 10 seconds from now or whatever the case is, and how that is separate from the long game of life. To me, it's all the same now. The now is the now. The now is the now. There's a future. There's a past, but I'm living in the now. And so if I hear whole, the first whole, the first time I hear whole and I haven't heard the other two holes, I know what's up. And I don't have to sweat the details of what's going to happen tomorrow because I'm just focusing on the now. And so to me, it's there isn't much of a balance per se. I mean, we can idealize our future plans. We can plot and scheme and have a mission profile that is 10 days long and all of that good stuff. You can have the overarching understanding of how things should play out in the near future. But a long time ago, I started working on the now and just simply focusing on the now. It was something that, a quick story, super quick. It was something that I learned back in 2 Commando. We were gearing up. We got all large and in charge with camo paint on and all of the good live ammunition stuff. And we were loading onto a CC-130 in order to go jump down into Jamaica to do something because there was a little hoo-ha going off. Things were getting a bit whatever. And so we were scaling up to go do. And as we were climbing on the Herc, we got stop dropped. It's called off. We might be going tomorrow. And same. And after a couple of repetitions of that, I just kind of looked at the whole thing and I thought, man, you're never in Jamaica until your foot is in the sand. Have I ever said that to you, Chance? I don't know. I occasionally I use it as a catchphrase that most people don't understand. But that's how I feel about life, man. You're never on the mission until your foot is in the dirt. So you can scheme and dream and think of all kinds of things, but the only thing that actually exists is the now. So as you're preparing to go to Jamaica, prepare for the now. Like, focus on your now. Square your gear away. Put some extra oil on your blah, 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 whatever. Only consider the now with a remote eye on maybe if I'm shaping the future, it could go this way or that way. A little bit of alternative planning, but really we've just got the now.
Yeah. We always used to say nothing ever happens till you got boots on the ground.
Mhm.
And that's that's it. Corey, Corey, you got any thoughts on this? Let's put you up first.
Yeah, sure. Interestingly enough, I don't think there is a balance. I think, at least not a static balance. I think that it often changes. And I know for myself, as a police officer, and again, I'm only speaking for myself. This is only my experiences and not those of anybody in my organization. But I know that often the choices that we make in the short term are often, and they should be, judged in the long term. But you never know when that's going to be. You never know who's going to do it. The people that you think would be doing it aren't. And sometimes the results of those change what you do in the short term on a day-to-day basis. So you may be very heavy into making sure you're constantly looking at the short term. What are the short-term goals? What are the short-term risks? What am I doing? How am I helping people? But that might switch to what's more the long game. What am I looking at? What's my career goals? What's my training goals? Things like that. And they often play off one another back and forth. And maybe for this month, my short-term balance is 20/80. You know, it's more short. And then next month, it's more long-term because all of this stuff came up, and I realized I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing, and I really need to balance that, and I really need to make sure that I'm looking at that. And I find that changes year by year, month by month, depending on what I'm doing. A funny aside, though, for short-term and long-term stuff, and your depiction there, Shaun, of Jamaica and having sand underneath you, even going through training, you know, they tell us where we're going in Canada. But even that changes within training. I had a troop mate who was told he was going one place on the East Coast. A week later, he was told, nope, scratch that, you're going to another place on the East Coast. So he tells his family, I'm going here. And then a week later, they put him back at the first place he was going. So he's calling back home all the time, telling people, hey, this is where I'm going, but it's not. So they're making short-term goals. This is where we need to start looking for houses. This is what we need to start doing. Long-term goals, how are we going to raise our kids? And then just week by week by week in training, it just changed. And then I think he ended up going somewhere completely different, but, you know.
That sounds much like the military. Matt, you got your thoughts?
No, that's pretty much everything's been summed up. It's like every moment, every decision, every second, that always changes everything. So your plan, your end goal, whatever, that has to be slightly adjusted as you make your smaller decisions. But keeping that end goal in mind as your final state, level 9,000, power level, keep that in mind, but know that it's always going to be adjusted.
I do have a little point to make. I started making my point, but I didn't make it very nuanced. And between Matt and Cory, I realized now that I got to clean it up a little bit more. So when I said I just do my now, right now, I don't worry too much about the future. But that wasn't the case when I was a young buck. I had to figure all this stuff out. I had to face a lot of diversity, a lot of fluid volatility in order to operate in the now. So let me give you a real world example. After this podcast, I'm hopping in the car with Keegan and we're driving to Vancouver Island to hit Operation Pegasus Jump. It took me 5 minutes to pack. I took a quick photo of my bag and threw it up on my Instagram stories. It's a big green bag, and it's big because I can pack in less than 5 minutes. It'll hold whatever I need. I can chuck it in there. Like I just threw my bike riding helmet as my now jump helmet on top of the gear. And I looked at it and I thought, done. And that's it. Simple. Took me 5 minutes. But I do know people who will pack and plan for weeks to go out to Operation Pegasus Jump, because maybe it's their first big deal or their first grand adventure or whatever, however you want to term it. Maybe it's their 10th. But for me, it's my 1,000,000th. I mean, I just don't even think about these things. I've just traveled too much. I've done too much. I've been to too many places and thought about too many things to worry about the tiny little details of how many socks should I take. I know exactly. I need a big green bag. I chuck some stuff in it and then I go kick ass. But that was not me when I was 20. When I was 20, I was looking at my rucksack thinking, do I take a toothbrush or don't I take a toothbrush? You know what I mean? How much toothpaste should I take? I don't know, 1 or 2 tubes. These are they're non-factors to me now, but I had to go through the bajillion iterations of doing it wrong to now be able to just shrug my shoulders and say, bring it, life, and I'll figure it out in the real time. Does that make sense?
Tanya's got a great quote here she put up. It says, "You admire the beauty of my spark, but you don't feel the cruelty of the hammer on the anvil that makes it happen." Friedrich Nietzsche. And I think that's a great point, because basically everything in life, she even puts this in here, even movie production is like anything else. 6 to 8 hours of prep work for 1 hour of filming. And I think this is where the misconception happens, is that the depiction is what others see, right? And that's where the misconception happens. I was just thinking about this, is that if you're going to work, right, your colleagues, they have no idea what your morning looks like. They just know that you show up dressed in the dress of the day, whatever, right? And you're here. Cool. You made it on time. Excellent. Now you can get to work. But they don't see the hour, 2 hours of however long, you know, some people wake up, they work out, they do all these things, then they get ready, then they eat breakfast, then they have some coffee, and then they go to the door. Other people wake up with like 20 minutes and they quickly shave and jump in the car and off they go, right? But the misconception is that you show up to work and you're dressed, which means that you supposedly did everything correctly that morning. But who knows? There's a misconception there. It's just an assumption that all these things work. Salty Jinx adds in from the previous comment, Tanya, and that 1 hour of shooting is 5 seconds of film in the end. That's what really kicked it off. And they go back and forth. Salty Jinx and MMA too. Fans don't realize that those 15 to 25 minutes are a snapshot of 2 to 3 months of brutal work and facing your deepest insecurities. And that's one of the things I wanted to bring up, especially in service-oriented jobs. And when you're talking first responders, military, I would even go so far as to say most service-related jobs. You're talking dispatchers and like support elements for the first responders. There's a huge misconception as to what those jobs do, what they take from people, how much stress is laid on it. There's this concept that you know, we only ever see the snippets of people. We don't actually see the depth, which is, I think, one of the things that we're trying to do with the collective, at least with this conversation. Any thoughts on that?
I'd like to add something to that.
Yeah.
So we went to the example of some guys wearing black as rappelling down a glass tower. And what the audience remembers is this: as the guy's kicking out and going through the window, that's a snapshot in their mind of, wow. But had a guy slide by the house on his drive across Canada there just a couple of days ago, came over, hung out, and etc. At our house. And he is in the movie industry. But he's a lead hand, senior lead hand on various sets. And he builds all kinds of things, like crazy, sort of complicated, amazing things on sets. And the hours that he works is bonkers. It's a really, really high velocity job that has a lot of stress, a lot of responsibility, a lot of meet that timing, because we need that spaceship to be good to go by Tuesday. And so no one sees all of that hard work. And that guy is stressed. All the audience sees is a spaceship for 2 seconds going across the screen. But he's been cramming on that thing for a month or whatever. And it does go back to your point, Chance, of dispatchers and such. Or in the military, it might be the air movement crew or what have you. Everyone gets all of that fundamental work, that foundational work, all of that necessary work in order to get that dude swinging off a window and going through one-handed with his 6-hour P226 or whatever. The audience, the world, only sees that 6-hour P226 going through the window. They don't consider all of the pyramid that is required just to get that guy a pair of black socks, never mind a 6 hour. All of the stuff that is maybe the most important stuff to get the guy to the start line. No one ever reads or hears or sees that stuff in the movie. They just see a guy diving off the edge and piecing out as he's about to go through an explosive breach. Like, that's the only thing that occurred in the sequence of events. Well, it's not. That guy never gets to go off the building. In fact, may not even get to the site if the bus driver gets lost or what have you. And so the point being that there are a pile of things that occur through life that most people are unaware of in order to create these moments that are then misconceived by the audience because it's depicted as, oh, this is just how it goes. You know, when there's a problem, someone appears wearing X, Y, and Z and then simply pieces out as they go over and do an explosive breach. It isn't like that at all.
Not even close. Corey, you got some?
Yeah, actually, just to piggyback on that with your service industry, what people don't understand. I'm married. My wife is a pharmacist. She's been a pharmacist for several amounts of years. I have no idea what pharmacists did prior to meeting my wife. Complete misconception as to what they do. I go to a doctor, I've got something, gives me a prescription, I go walk up, some nice looking person, friendly person tells me, yeah, it'll be 30 minutes. And I look at them and I go, what are you doing? And I think Jim Gaffigan, had the joke of, what are you doing? Putting the bottle on the other side of the room and just throwing pills in? Like, why are you taking 30 minutes? And through talking to her and several other people that I now know in that service industry, they had to go to school for 5 years just to learn about drugs. And here's the thing, to throw pills, right? They're just 3 pointers,
those reps
right?
in, right?
But the point is that I thought the doc gave me this prescription. I just go fill it out. I take it, no problems. No, it is not anywhere close to that simple. The amount of times that a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding on behalf of the doctor, maybe a mistake, could potentially cause a lethal combination to you, and you won't have a clue until you're lying on the floor, potentially dying, is something that they have to catch. The stress on them is immeasurable. And they're not doctors. So don't walk in, open up your shirt and say, does this look infected? Don't do any of that. They're not claiming to be doctors, but the sheer level of expertise and specialization that they need to do and carry for you coming in on something that you may think may be fairly mundane, but actually because of another medication the doc didn't know you were on that they were able to see, that's a potentially lethal sort of situation. So people come in, you say, I'm sick, I'm tired, I just want my meds, I want to go home. And they say, I'm sorry, it'll be 40 minutes. And you lose your mind, because how hard is this? Take the bottle that has that on there, dump in the amount of pills, and let me pay for it and go home. But it's not that simple. And there's several other people. There's also the fact that they need to, I don't know what the correct word is, but they need to talk to you about all of the medication, all the potential side effects, everything that you need to do, what you need to do if you need to do this. And they need to do that with every single person. But I don't have a clue about that. I just want my meds and I want to go home. But that, I think, is a misconception that happens in a lot of service-related industries. I put my order in. Why is it not here yet? You don't know.
100%. Matt,
you're right. And I used to think the same thing until our youngest son, who's just graduated grade 12, has entered into, he starts in September. It is being accepted for a while. The rural pre-medicine program out here. It's a 3-year program. And then after that, he's loosely planning on becoming a pharmacist. And I always used to think like, what, dude, just put some freaking pills, like gas. I'm supposed to get 100 if you give me 95, no big deal. Like, let's just freaking pick up the pace, pal. That's what I used to think. But then I realized, like, what? It's a minimum of 5 years. I had no idea. So, I mean, I'd observed all of the old timey pharmacists, the old crusty dude, the whatever. And, dude, I just want X, Y, and Z. Where's the aspirin? Can you just throw a guy a bone? And so, but then through this process of Keegan getting into rural pre-med, I then had my eyes opened up to, holy moly, it's quite a professional requirement. It's a long grind to just get to the start line of day one. Now you're a legit pharmacist. Okay, there's the reason that they're doing this is good reasons, and so you don't know what you don't know. And I wouldn't have known a freaking thing about pharmacists if our son wasn't going into it, and therefore I had a misconception of what their job was about and how the old-timey pharmacists were depicting their jobs. It looked like it was just aspirin counting. And so, it's you raise an interesting point, buddy.
I like that. Matt, you got any thoughts?
I'm just going back to Shaun's packing story and Cory's pharmacy story. I guess to sum it up, and like the big thing about misconception and going back to Tanya's point about the big goals, small goals kind of things, experience, understanding, and seeking knowledge is what it really bases down to. Because you're right. Like, I didn't know, like, I just learned something today, Cory, about how pharmacists work. Like, I didn't know they actually checked out everything. That's cool. Like, I want that now. It's like, hey, I got 30 minutes. Yeah, no, take an extra 40. Like, make sure we're good to go, right? But yeah, to combat all this, I mean, it's knowledge, communication, and learning, and that's basically what we're doing here, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. The thing that really kind of caught me, so very similar. Cory, my wife, is a library technician. She's one of the support staff that works in the library. She's not a librarian. I again, for years, I was like, what, you stack books, you take books in, you put them back on the shelves, like, what? That's really, like, you got to go to school for this, you got to get a degree, you got to get a diploma, all these things. And no, there is a ton of stuff, researching and understanding how, like, they had multiple classes on how to utilize Google and AI and all these things on how to better serve the students, which is their main goal, right? But that misconception comes from our personal depiction of our experience from years past. So my depiction of what a librarian was from being in, like, an elementary school, and the librarian that is there is not technically a librarian. Some of them are, but they may not be an actual degreed librarian. They might just be a library technician. They might just be some random person on the street that does literally just put books back on and off. But that depiction comes from me, not from anybody else. And I wanted to clarify that, because clarify that from earlier. As Shaun said, it's us that creates these misconceptions. We allow these misconceptions. We allow these depictions to kind of happen versus combating them. And I don't mean, getting up in somebody's face and be like, do you know what a pharmacist does? Right. But, when someone's sitting in line waiting, you're waiting for pills, they're waiting for pills, and they're like, oh God, what is it? Just takes forever. Can you not just put the pills? And you go, hey man, like, they're making sure you don't die. You want to give them a little slack, or give them a little bit of grace. It's kind of crazy. Any thoughts? I got another comment here from Tanya, but
I would say this, that my understanding of librarians when I was a young fella was the only course that a librarian took was this. Shh. That was about a year-long course.
It is. It definitely
perfect
is.
Their shh.
Yeah. It is a course. They do have to take it. Although it's similar. Matt and I we had to take a class on how to use a hammer.
Yeah,
so
that's
I mean, Matt had to teach the class on how to use a hammer. So exactly. Tanya says, very important lesson to learn. When I get up at inefficiencies or seeming incompetence, from example, a cashier, I realize there's process/decisions that are being made that I'm not aware of. Gave me patience and compassion. That's a great point. One of the things, the taglines I use a lot is grace, not slack, right? You give people grace, which give people time. Like, there's things that are happening that you don't know. Just as a bare minimum, there are things that are happening that you don't know. But something that needs to be, now the slack portion of that, not the slack portion of that, right, is you don't allow obvious slack. I trying to think of another word to put it in there, but I can't think of it.
Attitude is what
sure.
I was thinking of, because like you talk about a cashier, maybe it's their first day, their 1000th day, I don't care, whatever, it's pretty easy to see the process. You can understand when someone's efficient and effective,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't know if it's their first day or their 1000th day. But what I do know, irrespective of what day, if you've got attitude. And so if you're a pharmacist and your job requires, we'll call it 27 minutes to get all of the pills in the bottle, that's the appropriate amount of time. But you look at me and say, come back tomorrow, you loser. Okay, now that's attitude. You know what I'm saying? So that's a large or a gross misrepresentation of what any pharmacist would ever do. But the fact remains that there's a process, and you can give some grace, but then there's attitude. And that is something that, you just can't let slide all the time. Anyway.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I mean by the not slack. You can't give up that kind of slack to allow attitude or allow any of those things over. But a little bit of grace, at a bare minimum, a little bit of grace, allow people to do their jobs, I think, important. Tanya then continues, says, especially when an employee or product sucks, I now see there's a lot of decisions/limitations that led to this thing sucking. So I think,
yeah, well, the trick is, if it's a product, that's on you because you didn't research properly. If you need a new truck and you go buy the truck that everyone knows is a problem, that's on you. But an employee, that's a whole different thing. Now that's an organic product, or I shouldn't say organic. That is a person, and that person can play it all kinds of different ways. It doesn't come as a Ford. It's not a Ford truck that has known issues. It's doesn't exist anywhere in the world truck other than that truck immediately in front of me called that person. And they may suck and they may not, but holy cronkamole, there's a lot of nuance in that person standing in front of you versus just a product.
100%. You guys got any thoughts, Matt or Cory?
I think the idea of attitude with what Shaun was saying is fantastic. I know I've been standing in line somewhere, to use Tanya's thing of a cashier, and there's been a long lineup, and I can see everybody's getting flustered, and I start getting flustered because I've got things to do. I'm super important, and they just look up. The cashier looks up and goes, hey, I'm terribly sorry. I know you guys are waiting a long time. We were just having an issue with our cash problem. We're trying to work it out right now. Thank you very much. And for whatever reason, it just disarms me. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, they're trying their hardest. I can see that they're working. Everybody's getting flustered. And it's a simple acknowledgement, which changes my perception, which then also changes my misconception of what's going on. And I think it's something that if I think that somebody is doing their best, even though maybe it's not what I would do, because I'm going to be so much better at being a cashier because I've seen it on TV. But even if it's something where I see that they're doing their best, that's where that grace comes in. And I go, you know what? They probably didn't get up today, come into work and hope they had a bad day and something broke and they had everybody pissed off at them. They probably weren't looking for that. And that idea of giving somebody that grace to change your perception, to change that misconception that they're doing it because they want you to have a bad day.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Matt, you got any thoughts?
I like being the person, the opposite side of that. Kind of going with your whole cashier story, Cory. You know how people get flustered and everyone starts feeding off emotions and like, oh, this place, blah, 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 right? I like being the person where I actually verbally say, no, that's good. I understand you guys got a problem. And be that person to actually try to bring down the crowd too as well. Not in a forceful way or like, dominating way or anything like that, but like, be that slight whisper of understanding and patience so that everyone else can maybe chill out too and I can get my Doritos. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I think it's a two-way street. I do. So let me give a really hard example of how it's not done well. It doesn't matter if they're a day one or a day 1000er behind the cashier checkout. If they've got attitude, it's a problem. So let me give you an example of the attitude. Again, it doesn't matter how long they've been on the job. If as the 1000 person lineup is flustered watching the person at the cashier checkout work their phone and yawn and dawdle and not check anything out. Maybe they check a person out every 5 minutes because they're on Candy Crush or whatever. Okay, how does that work? I'm not going to rally the troops and say, okay, everyone just be quiet. because they're not finished their Candy Crush game yet. They're a bit tired. They're a bit yawny. Let them not do their job. So there's a difference. You know what I mean? It's a two-way street. It really is. If I see someone struggling and they're making an effort, we'll call it doing their best. It doesn't even have to be their best. It could be a 7 out of 10 nowadays. If they're making an effort, I'm going to rally the troops. But if they're actively being a goof, well, guess what? I'm going to lean over and say, hey, is there another lineup that we can go in? Can we get another cashier to open a checkout? Can we not watch you play your video game? I mean, you gotta hold people accountable.
Absolutely.
Shaun, I'm when I mentioned that I kind of defrag the situation, I'm the same way in that scenario too. If people are dogging it, like when I was expoing at the kitchen and there's two dudes and they're like talking about the weekend and I need hands that run plates and stuff. I'm like, dudes, when you're done talking about the wedding or your weekend and your wedding together, you want to come over here and start running. Like, I made it loud, so like people in the dining room heard it, right? So I'm the kind of person that will defrag a situation and kind of get a semblance of patience if needed. But if the situation and the attitude of the person I'm talking to, I will call it out. And it's like,
100%,
100%, yeah.
I think I think both sides of that are accountability.
Yeah.
Right. You're keeping people accountable regardless. There's a great example when we were doing when we were at Pegasus Jump last year, and I was trying to get the setup for the round table at the end, and I was trying to get all my riders to work, and things were going wrong left, right, and center. And I mean, I was obviously struggling because both Seb and Shaun were like, relax, take something to drink, work on what the problem is. What's this problem? What is that the problem? And like, it was obvious that I was struggling trying to get stuff done, but they were holding me accountable to the effort that I was putting in. Right. And that was, you need support. Cool. We're here to help. If I had just been like throwing stuff around and knocking chairs over and getting all frustrated and angry and, throwing that attitude back out in so that much that the depiction of what I was doing was nothing, then I would expect to be held accountable at the same time to that depiction. And I think that's what it comes down to, back to the depiction misconception concept, is the fact that, we have our own depiction of what we're doing, but other people are depicting what we're doing as well. And so it needs those two things in order to not have a misconception. Those two things need to align, right? If I think I'm working hard, but I got my Candy Crush out right at the counter, my depiction of working hard is not meeting the depiction of what everybody else is seeing. And so that's where the misconception comes in. And that misconception in that particular example is me. I have a misconception of what it is I am doing. And I think, going back to what Shaun said right at the beginning, depiction and misconception always comes back to this guy.
It does. But it's a two-way street. And using your example that you just laid out, I recall the moment observing you, like passively, not judgmentally, but passively observing you to see where your head was at and see if your actions were correct, if your logic was correct, if your sense of the space that you were holding was correct for the moment. And I needed to observe you long enough to make sure that you were offline, or you were uncalibrated for how to do it properly. And as I was doing that, I was watching the crowd that was directly behind you to see if they were picking up on it. And I was peripherally watching Seb on my flank to see if he was picking up, because he was, kind of right next to me. So I knew that he was observing. I knew that I was observing, but neither of us were hawking you. We weren't like a couple of hunting birds waiting for you to make the tiniest of tiny mistakes.
Yeah.
It played out to a point where I realized that you just needed a little bit of guidance, a little bit of help. Nothing big, just a little bit of a reset, as it were. And so it requires, in these moments, it requires a experienced eye for the nuance of the improvement. If someone wants to jump in and help Chance Burles in that moment, and they've never helped anyone before, or they don't understand anything, or they can't spell nuance, well, they're going to do it wrong.
Yeah.
and then you're going to respond incorrectly. And then maybe that moment blows up into a scene like, you can't tell me how to podcast. I'm a podcaster, or whatever, like the blow up moment then turns into a really negative situation. But a couple of dudes like Seb and maybe myself just quietly saying, hey, man, it's really hot out. You're working hard. You need some water. Here, let me get that for you. What cable do you need? Can I go get it? It requires an ability to read the situation with nuance to do it properly. It doesn't matter what Chance Burles was trying to represent in that moment, put out the perception that he had it under control. It requires someone with a keen eye to understand that he has a misconception of how to do it right, even though he's trying to depict that he's doing it right. So a little hand, a little quiet word off to the side, as it were, can usually square things up.
Yeah, 100%. And it was very much appreciated because I was sweating like
you were.
It was it was really bad. It was so hot. So I think we're gonna cut it a little bit short this morning because I need to make sure I get to class on time so I can teach my students. But any final thoughts on depiction, misconception, anything that we've talked about so far? Matt?
Basically, I think it's learning experience and doing yourself research on certain things. Like when back to like Mission Impossible 47, like look in, like actually research that. Don't just go, oh, it's cool, I'm gonna go do that, and just go, make lifelong decisions. Take the small moments right now and learn about it before you jump into something. More research, better.
I like that. That's a great idea. Corey, any final thoughts?
Yeah, same thing as Matt. Research, and then when you think you know it, go talk to somebody in that field, and then go talk to an additional person in that field and ask them what they dislike about that, and then you'll start getting to the honest truth as to what's going on.
I like that. Shaun, final thoughts?
I like those two things enough that I'm not going to add anything more.
Well done. One of the things that I wanted to say as a closing thing on depiction and misconception is that it happens regularly, and that to think that you can go through life without depicting something incorrectly or misconstruing something is a fallacy. So understand that it happens. Understand that there's going to be times that you don't know what's going on, and have the grace to, as you guys said, research, look it up, talk to people, engage that idea, and that way you can learn how to do it better. That way you can build upon that idea and grow into the depiction that you want to. And you can do that with us every day here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.